Understanding is understanding cause and effect. And maturity is what comes from our commitment to something, right? And so if we want to walk in wisdom and maturity, we need to know what should we want, and then are we committed to what we should want? And all of that starts with the fear of the Lord, which we talked about was an appreciation of who God really is. If you don't start with that, everything else you know about God will be on shaky ground. You have to start with, He's bigger than me. He's stronger than me. He's wiser than me. He's holier than me. If you have that foundation of, whoa, you are so much better than I could ever understand. You love me so much more than I could ever understand. You're so much stronger, to where it's like, thank God you're on my side, right? That's the fear of the Lord, is this looking, like seeing God and being aware of, whoa, I'm amazed and overwhelmed at how amazing you are. And then when you build on that and you say, whoa, you love me. Well, you're the one who healed me. You're the one who set me free. You're the one who died for my sins. It changes everything. You need to have that at the core. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and then you can build on that with more. And we understand everything at a deeper level if we start with that. And so we want to have that basic appreciation. And so today what I want to talk about is problem solving. Problem solving, I'm going to talk about creativity still in the next 2 hours and talk about unshakable, unstoppable. But problem solving is crucial. In my own life, I've been having to apply a lot of this. It's kind of like when you work on something, it starts to come up and you're like, oh, wow, I just was asking God how to learn this, and I'm learning by practice. In my non-deaning life, this weekend, I totally forgot that this is when I finished this course. And so I chose Friday to close on a house and yesterday to move into a house. And so I have all these crazy things going on. And so, and we'll talk about priority lists in a little bit, but when you have that perfect storm of like, okay, I have these 6 responsibilities that are really high priority, and I only have time for 2 of them, what do I do, right? And so we have to put this kind of thing into practice. So anyway, problem solving. This is going to be a bit more, let's say, brainy, but I'll show how it connects with other things, okay? Not all of them are going to make you go, wow. Some of them are laying the foundation, okay? So anyway, first point, why is problem solving important? Okay, part of being wise and mature is being able to solve problems. Like I mentioned in lesson 2, things that are scary or difficult for the immature can be easy for the mature. So if you're immature in an area of your life, you might see something and you freak out. You're like, the world's coming to an end. I can't do anything about this. It's all over, right? You get a bad report. You have something happen and you just kind of fall apart, right? But if you're mature in that area, you can say, no problem. I can solve this, right? This is a very important part because no matter how much wisdom you have, if the minute something doesn't go your way, you fall apart, you won't get very far, right? Because not everything's going to go your way. The Bible's full of heroes of the faith who overcame different problems. I mean, they all overcame many problems throughout their lives, but some that they're famous for. Noah and the flood. He had to overcome a problem. Here's this problem. God's going to wipe out the earth. Okay, what are you going to do about it? Well, I guess I'll obey God. He told me what to do. So that's overcoming a problem. Abraham had to learn how to trust God. He went to an unknown land, and you see how he overcame it little by little, where it's like he didn't fully overcome everything right away. Some problems, where it's like he left his country, but he took his family with him, and God said, leave your family behind. And you see his growth in that process of things that were difficult. Later on, he grew to the point where he was willing to sacrifice his own son, right? He didn't start there, but he grew into that. He was able to overcome that problem. We see Joseph. I've talked about him before in other lessons. He was in prison. How did he overcome that problem? How did he overcome the problem of Pharaoh's dream? Right? David has all kinds of problems that he overcame. Goliath. Okay, here's a problem. How do I solve this problem? Saul. David was anointed to be king. He was serving the king, and suddenly the king hates him because God started lifting David up and Saul didn't like it. That's a problem where you say, my calling is taking me here, but it's also causing conflict over here. What do I do about that? How did David respond to that situation? Then David had the same thing happen to him almost, where Absalom tried to take over the kingdom from him. And so we'll look at that also for a little bit. How did David respond when someone tried to steal the kingdom from him and start a rebellion, and some of his most trusted advisors betrayed him? Solomon, He was very famous for having wisdom where he could help people. He asked for wisdom, right? You have the famous one of the two women showed up and they said, "This is my baby." And the other one said, "No, that's my baby," right? So because he had wisdom, he was able to look into the situation and solve that problem. He was able to dig past the surface. Well, it's her word versus her word. And he said, well, okay, what's actually going on here? What's the real situation? He's able to use his discernment to solve that problem. Jesus, obviously, he solved all kinds of problems. He saved all of us. If not all of us, please come forward and we'll do an altar call. But Jesus overcame, obviously, huge problems, but he also had these little problems where people came his way throwing problems at him, right? Should we pay taxes to Caesar? Lose. If you say we shouldn't pay taxes, you're an enemy of Rome. If you say we should pay taxes, you're endorsing Rome, right? And Jesus, he saw through that, and he solved the problem in a way that none of them expected. The same thing when they brought to Jesus the woman caught in adultery. We're like, we got you. You have to either say, don't follow Moses' law, or you have to consent to killing this woman right now. Lose. So many people would have crumbled, right? Probably everybody would have crumbled, but Jesus didn't. Jesus was able to see the big picture. What's the real situation that's going on here? And he was able to solve that problem. Same with feeding the 5,000. Okay, 5,000 hungry people. What do we do? Right? Jesus solved the problem. For the disciples, it was, it's kind of like Sherlock Holmes stories where Sherlock Holmes already knows the answer. It's his partner that doesn't, right? Same with Jesus, where the disciples don't know what's going on. Jesus already knew what he was going to do. How do you feed 5,000 people when you don't have 5,000 meals ready? Right? And so, again, hopefully the second year, so I'm not going into all these stories in depth. I'm just referring to them. But basically, problems are a real part of life. And I don't mean that to be a negative thing. We don't know everything. We can make mistakes. And then also, everybody else in the world doesn't know everything, and they can make mistakes. We're surrounded by people who can make mistakes. So problems are going to happen. We're set free from the devil, but we're not set free from the free will of other people. That's why persecution is the one thing that we're not promised we won't have. And so we live in a fallen world. Our flesh will try to convince us to do things that we don't want to do, that aren't good for us, right? The reason God doesn't want us to sin isn't because he's mean, it's because sin is death. So he's saying, don't choose death. And our flesh says, no, choose death. And if we give into our flesh, we're choosing death. And then we say, why on earth is my life terrible? You keep choosing death. And so our flesh wants to do that. And then we're surrounded by a world of people who are living according to their flesh. Even in the church, you're dealing with people who are at different stages of growth. And so even if people 99% of the time are walking in the Spirit, if they ever accidentally walk in the flesh, that might affect you. It might cause a problem in your life. We're in a world full of self-centered people. Sometimes problems find us. We're just trying to mind our own business and a problem comes our way. And sometimes we go after the problems intentionally. There's two different approaches. When there's a fire, most people run away and you see some people running toward it. If there's a gunshot, most people run away, some run toward it. Why do some run toward it instead of run away? Usually it's because they have a cell phone and they want to post it on Facebook or something. Okay, or maybe they're like, I just want to help, I don't know what to do, I'll just get in the way, right? But in a good situation, the reason why some people run toward it is because they're equipped for it. They know what to do. They have the training, they have the resources. They either know what to do, they have the skill set, or they have the equipment. I may have used this example before, but when you have a storm and you have like the Coast Guard show up and a guy jumps out of the helicopter into the water, he's in the exact same water that the person drowning is in. But the difference is that he's trained, has the equipment, has the support, knows what he's doing. That's the difference. And so if we're equipped, it totally changes how we approach a problem. We can get beat up by the storms of life, or we can go into it and be like, no, I'm not the victim, I'm the hero of this story. I'm here to solve this problem. I have more than enough. I know I'm running toward this because I'm part of the solution. I'm not part of the problem. I'm not scared of this, right? And so people are equipped with knowledge, with training, with equipment, with literal, actual equipment. They have confidence. One thing I've noticed over the years is I think there's two main causes of confidence, two main sources of confidence. One is you know what you're doing. I'm confident because I know exactly what to do. I know how to do this. The other source of confidence is you have no idea what you're doing. And you see that a lot where it's like, I'm so confident. Why? Because I'm me. and they run into the problem and they just make a mess. Like, I am 100% confident, no idea why I'm confident, other than the fact that I'm confident in myself. And so you want to be both a little bit, right? You want to be confident, and I'll get to that in a little bit, but you want to be confident because you know what to do. You also want to be confident because you know you can find out what to do, right? And so if I were to get up one day during praise and worship, and I stood on stage and said, none of the singers showed up. I have a lapel, I don't know why I'm doing this. None of the singers showed up. I need somebody to come up here and lead worship. Some of you would be like, this is it. This is awesome. Praise God. I've been training for this in the shower for years. Finally, my moment to shine. You know, some of you would be like, this is awesome. Praise God. I knew it. On the drive to work today, I knew I was going to lead worship. Some of you would be like, please, God, no. Don't have them pick me. You know, if it's Rich, he'll probably pick you. If that's who doesn't want to sing, get on stage. And so, you know, because it depends, are you equipped? See, if you're prepared, if you're a good singer, if you have years of background in leading praise and worship, you'd be like, I'm ready for this. Or if you think you're prepared and you're not, you'd be like, I am ready for this. If anyone's watched American Idol back in the day, you know, where it's like, who told you? Has no one ever given you honest feedback? Right? And so if we think we're ready, or if we are ready, we'll be like, this is exciting. This is an opportunity, right? We won't be scared of it. You know, when I went to Russia, now I think it was like 7 or 8 years ago, like my first day at the school there, I was helping Mike and Carrie at the Karis campus in St. Petersburg. The very first day I go to the school, Carrie's like, oh, I'll have you introduce yourself for 2 minutes. And so I go in front of one of the classes and I start to talk. And right before I start talking, she's like, oh, wait, I need to take care of the baby. Just talk until I get back. And she runs off. And I was like, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10, 20, an hour, what on earth is going on? How do you tell a story when you don't know if this needs to be a really long story or a really short story, right? So I panicked. It probably didn't go that well. I just kind of rambled and just told random stuff, and Carrie showed up, and I was like, thank God, I hope I never do that again, right? I wasn't prepared for it. So I freaked out, and it was very subpar, I'd say, even for me. And so the last 2 years, well, that shouldn't have been that funny. Okay. But the last 2 years, while as assistant dean, part of my job was if someone doesn't show up, you have to go solve the problem, right? And so you guys may have seen me. I did it more second year, but you may have seen me sometimes where it's like, oh, someone didn't show up. So I jump up and I have to do something. What do? I have no idea, right? But because I prepared though, because I was like, okay, I remember what happened in Russia. I don't want to, because people always say, like, just get up there and rely on the Holy Spirit. And I'm like, the Holy Spirit, when I freak out, my ears just shut up and, you know, the Holy Spirit's like, you know, gone. I'm like, hello, Lord. And so that doesn't work. I mean, I've stood in front of people before just silently, like, what do I do? Like the reason I still use paper notes is because once I used a laptop and out of nowhere, like 20 minutes in, it decided to do an update and then it turned off. This will shut down after this update. And so I'm sitting there and I was like, because I panicked, my mind went blank. See, normally I probably could have rolled with something, but because I saw that, I was like, oh my goodness, what do I do? I literally froze, and everyone just waited 10 minutes while I had to reboot. I just kept apologizing. And so, again, I wasn't prepared, but see, I'll try not to do that now. You know, I was thinking, I'm being recorded. This isn't the first time I've been filmed for a course. Hopefully it's the first time they actually use what they filmed. In Russia also, they're like, oh, we're going to film you, teach some of your stuff so that we can use it for years after you leave. But then we were in this tiny little room, and it was in the middle of the summer, and we had to turn off the fans because they're too loud, and you have all these super bright lights like 3 feet from you. And so it's me and the interpreter with the camera right here, and we're just like sweating profusely. You know, I look at her and I was like, does my face look as red as yours? You know, because she's just drenched and I'm drenched. And so I told Mike and Carrie afterwards, they hadn't seen it yet. I was like, I'm so sorry. I don't know if you'll be able to use that. And they're like, oh, well, we're sure we'll be able to. We're sure it's fine. And they never brought it up again. It just disappeared somewhere out there. And so back to my main point. Okay, for the last 2 years, though, because it became my job, I prepared. So I thought in advance. You know, Rick told me, he's like, have a couple bullets in the chamber. Have a couple messages in your drawer so that if someone doesn't show up, you can just grab it and run and teach it. And so I was like, okay, but I was like, okay, I don't only teach the full hour. I need an arsenal, right? I need a lot of bullets in the chamber. I need big guns, little guns. So it's like, I need some 2-minute fillers. I need some 5-minute fillers. I need some 10-minute fillers. And so I started preparing for it. And so each time I'd try different things. It's like, I'm going to get up and tell a funny joke. Well, that didn't work at all. Okay, scratch that off. Don't use that future years. Or, I got an anecdote. Or, I'll just ask them to share testimony. And so instead of panicking, it turned into something exciting because I'd prepared for it. And so I tried different things, and so I'd look forward to it. I'd get disappointed once Dean Hawk wasn't here on time, and they said it might be 20 minutes. So I was like, oh man, I'm ready for this. I've got a really good story to tell everybody. And as I started telling the story, he showed up. I was like, oh man. And so it changes it because it changes your perception, right? How you react depends on your preparation. See, what caused panic before now caused excitement because I was ready for it. I wanted to try new things. I was like, okay, what will bless the students the most? See, at first, your first thought is, how do I not look stupid? Okay, and that's your main focus. But then once you overcome that, okay, I'm prepared enough, my goal shouldn't be how to not look stupid. It should be, how do I use this to bless the students, right? How do I make this productive, not a negative? How do I make this a positive? And so you start growing in that. So, let's see. Yeah, if we know what to do, it completely changes our reaction to when problems come up. And it doesn't mean that you're trained for every single situation. It doesn't mean you know the answer to every single question. It means you're confident you can get the answer. It means you're confident you can solve the problem. Things will come up that you've never expected or thought of, but if you know how to solve problems, you can say, I can get the answer. And so you won't have that panic. And so I want to go over Daniel 2, 3 through 19 real quick. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'll skim through it. But I want to show an example of this. So Daniel 2, 3 through 19. And the only reason I use Daniel so much is because we share the same name, so I can kind of talk about myself and not really. Anyway, so the king, Nebuchadnezzar, again, he's a captor, right? Daniel's been kidnapped. So this is a negative situation. Some people could just be victims the whole time and just be like, this is horrible, this is awful, I'm going to hunger strike, whatever. But Daniel isn't responding like that. So Nebuchadnezzar said to all his wise men, I've had a dream, and my spirit is anxious to know the dream. Then the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream and we'll give the interpretation. And he's like, no, you tell me the dream. Right, this is the paraphrase, if you didn't notice. You can read it in there. And so they're saying, tell us the dream and we'll help you out. And he's like, I'm not buying it. I need you to, if you're really that smart, if I'm paying you this much, if I listen to your advice, I need to know that you can actually tell me something I don't know, or tell me something that you don't know. And so they're saying, tell us the dream and we'll give you the interpretation. He says, no. So he says, my decision is firm. Verse 5. If you do not make known the dream to me and its interpretation, you shall be cut in pieces and your houses shall be made an ash heap. That's pretty intense. You'll be cut in pieces. Your whole house will be destroyed. They didn't mess around back then. I mean, back in the day, every country was like North Korea. Now we see that as like this horrible thing, and it is horrible, but it used to be like that around the world. Okay, so verse 6, however, if you tell the dream and its interpretation, you'll get gifts and rewards and honor and all these wonderful things. And so again, they say, but if you tell us this, we'll be able to help you out. And he says, no. And they say, this is a hard thing to do. Verse 10, the Chaldeans answered the king and said, there is not a man on earth who can tell the king's matter. Therefore, no king, lord, or ruler has ever asked such a thing of any magician, astrologer, or Chaldean, saying, this is impossible. No one's ever asked for this kind of thing before. You're being unreasonable. Right? Obviously, they're freaking out. They're about to be chopped up into little pieces. So this is serious for them. And so they're freaking out and they're saying, but please be reasonable. Verse 12. For this reason, the king was angry and very furious and gave the command to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. So the decree went out and they began killing the wise men. This wasn't just a threat now. They started doing it. And they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. So they have passed the training and now they're just working in the kingdom. That's a header. Okay, verse 14. Then with counsel and wisdom, Daniel answered Arioch, the captain of the king's guard. So with counsel and wisdom. So he didn't just freak out and say the king's being unreasonable. He answered in a different way. He kept his composure. So he answered Arioch. Verse 15. He answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree from the king so urgent? Then Arioch made the decision known to Daniel. So they had a conversation. And think about that. I'm here to kill you. And you say, well, let's talk about this. Very calmly, right? Not let's run away, let's freak out, let's beg for our lives. Let's talk about this. I know that you can't show me mercy or you'll get killed. So I'm going to have a conversation with you about this. Like we talked about before in one of the previous lessons, let's find a win-win situation. So verse 17, then Daniel went to his house and made the decision known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, that they might seek mercies from the God of heaven concerning the secret. See, he said, give me some time to look into this, and I'll come back with an answer. So Daniel didn't know the answer. He had no idea that this would happen. But he's like, I know how to get the answer. So that he went and told his companions, still in verse 18, so that Daniel and his companions might not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then the secret was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. So Daniel blessed the God of heaven. And it goes on to where he goes and explains it to the king, and he gets rewarded. And he grows in favor and in influence. And so it went from a negative thing. So he didn't just solve the problem. It turned around to where it became a very positive thing. It became an opportunity. And so, again, instead of freaking out, we can respond if we're confident, if we're equipped, that we know how to solve problems. If you have a family problem, a marriage problem, a financial problem, a career problem, if you freak out, you won't see the good options that are out there, right? And so if we're equipped, we'll approach them differently. We'll stay calm and solve the issue. You know, problem solving can apply to almost anything, right? It can go from learning how to tie your shoes, right? When a child learns to tie their shoes, it can be very frustrating, right? And they use the straps for a while or something. I don't know if anything better exists nowadays. But, you know, it can be a verse that you don't understand. Here's a problem. I don't understand this verse. I want to understand this verse. It can be something as big as, should I marry this person or should I not marry this person? It can be a decision where it's like, this will impact generations. What do I decide? Right? And so, can we solve problems that find us? And then are we so good at problems that we can solve them for other people, that we go chasing them because we can put out the fire? Right? There's problems that we can solve in ministry, in business, in your community, in the country that you're called to, in your family, in your friendships. If you're strong in this area, you can be a source of peace. See, some people, I'll get to that in a second, I'm sorry. If you have a church that needs ushers, that's a problem. If you have a company and you need an accountant, that's a problem. See, it's not just negative things. If you have a baby, they don't know how to do anything. That's a problem. They need to learn how to do something, how to do everything. If you need food and money to survive, that's a problem, right? If you want to get married and you're single, that's a problem. If you want to get married and you're married, that's a bigger problem. We'll talk about that later. If you want all of God's promises, but you're not seeing all of them, that's a problem, right? Because we sometimes think problem equals bad. Problem actually just means it's an opportunity for a solution. It doesn't mean it has to be a bad thing. It just means this is an opportunity. This is a turning point, a fork in the road, right? And so you can redefine problem as opportunity for a solution and go over that list again. If you need ushers at your church, that's an opportunity for a solution. If your baby needs to learn everything, it's not a bad thing. That's an opportunity for a solution. If you want to get married, that's not a bad thing. That's an opportunity for a solution. Right? So instead of getting beat up and thrown around by the storms of this world, we can be a source of peace. See, some people are always stressed. They're always overwhelmed, always in crisis mode. Every time you see them, they're like, it's an emergency. You know, it's not like a one-time bump in the road. It's like, no, they carry this with them everywhere they go, right? We've all met those people, but none of us are those people, right? You know, some people are always frustrated about something, upset about something. But we can be the opposite. See, the same way some people can enter a room and suddenly there's conflict, we can get to where we enter a room or may already be there and suddenly there's peace. We can walk into a room and suddenly there's joy. You know, once somebody told me, I already started, so I'll tell it, but I'm embarrassed to say it. But anyway, but someone said, wherever you are, this was in Florida, someone said, wherever you are, there's laughter. And I was like, that's the nicest thing someone's ever said to me. You know, I was like, that's cool that I can take that with me. Cricket. Not right now, but just kidding. So anyway, but again, you can take something with you that's inside of you, right? And so we can change the atmosphere wherever we go. Another way to look at problem solving is at its defense. We need a strong defense and a strong offense. See, offense is more exciting, but you need a good defense. You can have the best goal in the world, but if you don't know how to handle it when there's a problem, you won't get anywhere. You can have the best vision for your family's culture, but if you fall apart the minute someone's like, I don't want to do that. Blah, I hate you. Okay, that's one way to solve the problem. right? And so if we don't know how to react when a problem comes our way, we can just destroy what we're actually trying to pursue. So how do we solve the problem? Next point. The first step is we have to identify the real problem. See, solving problems is actually the easy part. Well, the hard part is knowing what the problem is. See, even from childhood, we're taught things like 2 + 2 = 4, right? What's the fastest animal on earth? Well, it depends. Is it falling out of an airplane? Then me, right? We're trained to solve problems that are fed to us. Here's the problem. Now find the answer. Here's the formula that you need to use for this math problem. Just plug and play. Just do these steps and you know it. Okay, but real life isn't like that. In real life, no one just says, here's the problem, here's the solution, or find the solution, especially in the information age. Nowadays, finding information is so easy. Getting answers. Nowadays, you have a calculator on everything. So solving the math problem isn't the hard part. It's knowing when to do it. Okay, I know 2 + 2 = 4. How on earth does that help me in life? Right? And so real wisdom, real maturity is being able to say, I can see what the problem actually is. I can figure it out without someone telling me. And so we have to figure out what the problem is before we can solve it. A lot of conflict, a lot of confusion, bad decisions, and mistakes are caused by people solving the wrong problem. So you can look at a situation, if you misdiagnose what the real problem is, you can do all the best problem solving in the world, and you're going in the wrong direction. You're making it worse. You're doing something else. So if you're like, someone corrected me, I feel ashamed. How do I overcome shame? I need to attack them so they feel more ashamed than me, right? Okay, that's solving the wrong problem. The problem wasn't that I feel ashamed. The problem was, oh, I messed up. Someone corrected me. I should be thankful, right? You rebuke a wise man and he will love you. And so what's the real problem? There's a saying that if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I don't know if any of you have heard that before. Basically, though, if you're really good at solving a certain kind of problem, you'll see that problem everywhere. It becomes a filter, right? If you love money management, you'll look around and be like, if they had better money management, that wouldn't be a problem. If they had better money, no matter what you look at, you'll be like, this is my go-to solution. Because see, I'm good at solving this, therefore that's the first solution that jumps out at me. But it might not be the solution to the real problem. It might be this side thing. It might make it worse, or it might just be irrelevant. Right? If you have a filter where you say, I only address the things that are easy, that jump out at me, that are obvious, then you're limited and you may make a mess. If 10 people could look at a beggar, and if you don't know the person at all, you just see them begging on the street. One person might say they need a job. Someone else might say they need mercy. Someone else might say they need food. Someone else say they need Jesus. Someone else could say they need better money management. Someone else could say they need a better attitude, and you don't know the person at all. And so we make assumptions based off of our filter of, well, this is what I think I would do in that situation. And so you assume, right? So you're saying, I'm a hammer. They need better work ethic. I have strong work ethic. They need better work ethic. That's a nail. I know how to solve this problem. But we don't actually know what the real problem is, right? We might be partly right. We might be totally right. We might be completely wrong. And so that's why wisdom needs to zoom back and see the real problem. What's really going on and what's really at stake. Smart people can look at the exact same situation and see totally different solutions. And it's not because they're not smart. It just means that they think there's a different problem. And so why does that happen? So the first step, so I know the other one was the first step. This is actually the first step. We have to go backwards. Before you can identify the problem, you have to identify your real goal. Until you know what your real goal is, you don't know what's in the way of it. See, if you look at a situation, you can say, here's the problem. Well, that's only a problem if this is your goal. If that's not your goal, that's not a problem, right? If you say, I got fired today, is that the problem? Well, it depends. Is my goal to have a job? Yes, okay, then it's a problem. No, I hated my job. Okay, then it's actually not a problem, right? It depends. What did you want in the first place? Because that will help you identify the real problem. You need to know the real goal. If you're in a leadership position, you need agreement on what the real goal is. If you're leading a church or a Bible study or a group of friends, leading the country, whatever, if there's no agreement on what the goal is, everyone's going to be pursuing different goals and they're going to see different problems. And again, that's what leads to conflict, is that they're saying, I know the solution. And you're like, that's not the solution. They're like 2 + 2 = 4. And you're like, who cares? I'm looking at 3 + 3. right? You're talking about totally different things and you see different problems. It's like, well, you're not helping me toward 4, so you're actually part of my problem now. How do I destroy you to get to where I'm trying to go? Because you're not helping me, right? So it can cause conflict when there's not unity. And so you start with the big picture. You want to zoom back all the way, but then you zoom in more. You go closer and closer. You need to start big. So obviously true unity will never happen outside of Jesus. Once God told me, if Jesus isn't the answer, you're asking the wrong question. I was like, interesting. I'll give a moment for y'all to write that down. And so if you own a business, why am I called to this business? What's the goal of this business? What's the goal of this product? What's the goal of this employee? What's the goal for this specific project? What's the goal for this specific meeting? Right? You start really big and you get smaller and smaller and smaller. Why are we having this meeting? Well, we just always have meetings. Okay, but why? Right? Why do we need this other person? Well, we always have that other person. Okay, but why? So you start big and you work your way down. In a church, what's the goal of this church? Not all churches have the exact same goal. Obviously, there's things that they all need to have in common, but they might have different visions. What's the goal of this church? What's the goal of each service? What's the goal of the sermon? What's the goal of praise and worship? You have very good churches that have very different goals for each of these things. What's the goal for children's church? Is it to keep them out of the way, or is it to raise them up to be men and women of God? What's the goal of having volunteers? We need work done, or we want them to grow by serving? Right? And so if there's no clear goal, we can get caught up in just doing things. And we're just doing things and we all kind of feel what the purpose is, but aren't totally sure. And so when a problem comes up, if we're all on different pages but don't realize it, when a problem comes up, no one's going to have agreement on what the solution is, right? Because everyone's going to say, well, I think we need to do this. Well, I think we need to do that. And if you're looking at different situations, trying to pursue a different goal, you'll be like, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard of. Why would we do that? Right? So let me give an example. Praise and worship. One church might say the goal is to, or one person in the same church, let's say, the goal is to honor God with the best musical performance possible. That might be the goal. Someone else in the same church might say, no, the goal is to lead the church in worship together. Okay, so 9 times out of 10, they might think they have the exact same goal. Oh yeah, let's practice on this song. Let's do this. Let's do that. Everything looks the same. But maybe that one time out of 10, something happens and now there's conflict. For example, what if you have an amazing singer that everybody in the church loves, but nobody can follow? What's the goal? If the goal is we want to honor God with the best music possible, that's easy. That's an easy option, right? If the goal is we want to lead the church in worship, it's also an easy option, right? But very different solutions based off of the goal. If you didn't know the goal, that could be lead to a lot of contention. Well, this person's amazing. Well, that doesn't matter, Well, how can people worship if the music's terrible? And people can go back and forth if there's no clarity on the goal. What if you need a drummer, but you're in a small town and the only drummer is not a Christian? Okay, well, what's the goal? Do you want people up there worshiping and leading in worship, or do you want people who are enabling worship, right? So I'm here to serve, and we're reaching out to this person, and they're getting them in church. Again, I'm not saying one's right or wrong, but you need to have clarity on the goal, because otherwise you'll start doing things that are inconsistent. Well, this time we said no, that one person can't sing, and this time we said yes, we hired a non-Christian. Well, wait, why don't so then you can have all this conflict and confusion. It all becomes very simple. See, 90% of problem solving is knowing what the real problem is, which is knowing what the real goal is. For another example, let's say that you want to go on a family vacation, and I'm sure no one can relate to a situation like this. Let's say, let's go to the park and have fun. So maybe a tiny vacation, an afternoon. Okay, let's go to the park and have fun. And then all of a sudden it's like, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. We're losing daylight. We got to go. And then, stop rushing me. You forgot your coat. We got to go back. I got to the bathroom. And then you get angry and you start yelling at everybody and you get to the park, right? And everyone's upset. And it's like, okay, but we made it to the park. Okay, was that the real goal? Or was the goal to have a fun family day? Right? And so you know what? Forget the park. The park's in the way. Let's just have a fun family. If the park and fun can't happen, then we choose fun. Right? Because if you don't know the goal, you can get sidetracked. See, what the park is the method. And that's one of the next things I want to touch on is don't get tunnel vision on the method you think is going to be the solution. Because if the method starts to change or starts to become the problem, you'll be fixated on it. You see, the method can come and go. The goal is I want to have fun with my family, right? And so, so many times, like, we got to get to church on time, or something like that. And it's like, by the time you get to church, everyone's mad at each other. It's like, I can't believe you made me, whatever. Again, no, the goal was to go as a family, worship God, all this stuff. And so if you keep your eye on the goal, everything's different. So it's kind of a more simple example would be like saying, I have $100, I need a wallet. So I'll spend $100 on a wallet. Okay, the solution actually removed the issue in the first place, right? You went in a circle. You lost track of why you wanted a wallet in the first place. Let me give another example. I'll go a little bit more in depth into this one. And I'm choosing this one just because I feel we can all relate to this, whether it's past or future or present. So, dating or courting, wanting to get married. Okay, if you say, I want to marry that person. Okay, why do you want to marry that person? Do you really want, is that your real goal? Yes, 100% that specific person. I want to marry them, I'm totally sure. Okay, but why? Why do you want to marry that specific person? Okay, well, they love God. They're gorgeous. We have the same vision for life. We have the same sense of humor. We like the same movies. There's something about them. I can't stop thinking about them. We could have an amazing marriage together. They make me feel special when they look at me. Have you ever, I don't know if this happens, maybe it only happens to guys, I don't know, where someone smiles at you and suddenly it's like, oh my goodness, they're the one. It's like, I've never felt this amazing. That, it's because something inside of us wants something that just happened. Like, oh man, I want to feel special. I want someone to like me, right? And so suddenly it unlocks the floodgates of like, oh my goodness. And so we can jump the gun, right? So let's break it down a bit. We can say they're all these things. But if you say, let me zoom back a little bit, why do I think that they're all these things? Okay, so really what you really want is, I want to marry somebody who loves God. I want to marry someone I'm attracted to. I want to marry someone who has the same vision. I want to marry someone with the same sense of humor, who enjoys the same things I do, like movies. I want to marry someone who I can't stop thinking about. I want to marry someone who makes me feel special. I want an amazing marriage. That's what you really want. See, the reason you think it's that specific person is because you think that that specific person checks all those boxes. This is how I can get everything that I want. And then if it turns out not to be that person, it can be devastating because you think you lost all your hopes and dreams. When actually it's like, no, your hopes and dreams are fine. You just lost that method. You lost that possible solution. It may not have even been the solution, right? Because see, if we get tunnel vision and so we say, forget what I actually want, I did the preliminary checklist, and so this person's the one. And so then what you do is you get fixated on them, and now what happens if everything starts to change? Like, oh wait, they don't actually love God, but I know they can. I totally know they will if I start taking them to church with me, right? Well, they aren't actually attracted to me, but I'll convince them. Or they don't like the things I like, but I'll pretend I like the things they like, and then it'll work out eventually, right? Or they don't feel special to me, or they don't feel special when I'm with them, but they will eventually, right, if they get to know me more. They don't want to marry me, but they will if they get to know me. They don't want to get to know me, but they will if I'm prettier, or if I'm handsomer, whatever. And so we start to do all these things to try and solve what we think is the problem. We're solving the wrong problem, right? And so again, we don't want to get fixated on the method. We want to keep our eye on the real goal. What if you did marry them? You married someone who's not attracted to you because you convinced them. They can't make you feel special forever anyway, because that's going to pass, because that has to come from God. They don't like the real you. And so again, you say, if I lose this person, I lose my dreams and goals. Actually, if you marry that person, you'll lose your dreams and goals. And so you can get fixated on what you think is the solution so much, you actually forget what you really wanted. So if we keep our eye on the big picture, what we'll say is, I want an amazing marriage, and this person might be the one who I can have that with. But if they aren't the one I can have that with, I definitely don't want to marry them. Right? And we need to think more highly of ourselves and be like, no, I don't want this. I'm not going to give up what I want and what I'm called to because I'm fixated on this specific thing right in front of me. And so your hopes and dreams are fine, and it's totally fine to be disappointed, right? You can be disappointed, oh man, I thought this was the solution, but it's not. It's like if you're trying to have a baby, like before, I'm trying to convince my wife to have another baby. But before you have a baby, it's kind of like, we might be pregnant. Oh, and then, we're not pregnant. Okay, I'm disappointed. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to have a baby. It just means we'll keep trying, right? And so in marriage, I want to marry someone I'm called to. I want to marry someone who's called to me. I want to marry someone who I'm attracted to. I want to marry someone who's attracted to me. I want to marry someone I enjoy and someone who enjoys me. I want to marry someone I'm willing to die to self for. I want to marry someone who's willing to die to self for me. I want to marry someone who likes that I love God more than I love them. And they feel special because of God, not because of me. And I want the reverse of that also. I want them to like that about me. I want them to be the same way. I want to marry somebody who wants to be married to me. I want to marry somebody I want to be married to, right? So again, I'm not actually, I'm kind of like, I'm pulling a Paul here. I'm not talking about marriage here. I'm talking about every single problem. This is an example of how every single problem works. We can get fixated on what we think is a solution, right? I'm called to pastor, and I'm going to pastor that church. And we get focused on, I'm called to that church. Okay, but what if that isn't the one that God called you to? And then you get your heart broken. You say, well, no, that one didn't work out. Oh no, I lost my calling. I missed God. Your calling's fine, just the method. You were off when it comes to the method. Okay. Once I was looking at a sunset, and I apologize again if I've shared this in the past, but once I was looking at a sunset, back when I was in California in Monterey, I used to walk along the coast for like 4 or 5 hours a day. And I'd walk really, really, really far and get exhausted, and then I'd be like, oh, I'm really far away, now I have to walk back. So I usually meant to only walk for 2 hours, but then I was really far away. And so I was walking out there, and I was looking at the sunset, and suddenly I realized I was just disappointed. I was anticipating nostalgia. I was like, oh man, this isn't going to last. In just a few moments, this moment's going to be over. And this is like the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And so I started to get sad. I was like, I can't capture it. Even if I took a picture, it wouldn't be the same. Have you ever done that, especially with cell phones or fireworks on your cell phone? You look at it like, why did I do that again? But you try to capture it, you can't. Something inside of us wants to capture everything, wants to own and possess everything that we like. And again, that's a different topic, but that's part of the fall, is we wanted to be our own gods. We want to possess everything, when in reality, we need to be possessed by God. And so I realized I'm never going to get to see this again. I'm going to lose this. And God just spoke to me and said, just because something's beautiful doesn't mean you have to own it. And it set me free, because it wasn't just about the sunset. Something inside of us is like, I want to have everything that I like. But there's amazing people that I'll never get to be friends with. It doesn't mean they're not amazing. Sometimes I used to see like friends, and I'd be like, I would totally get along with that group. It just hasn't worked out to where I can hang out with them, but I know we'd be good friends. That I can enjoy the fact that they have a great friendship. That doesn't have to affect me. I don't have to feel a sense of loss. I can feel joy that good things exist that aren't mine. Something can be delicious. It doesn't mean I have to eat it. An inside joke can be funny. It doesn't mean I have to be in on it. I can just be like, okay, y'all are laughing. I'll just sit here awkwardly while you all laugh. Let me know when it's my turn to jump in again, right? Just because a job would be fun doesn't mean it's the one you're called to. Just because a gift or a talent is amazing doesn't mean it has to be yours. See, it's much more fun to live life like that. To say, you know what, I want what God has for me. I don't feel loss or grief over things that aren't for me. Again, what do I really want? What am I really called to? Because you can say, man, that's so cool that you have a gift and a talent that I don't have. I love you can play that instrument that I always wanted to play and I don't know how to play. I love that you're more talented at that than I am. Because see, the reverse of that is like, oh man, I don't get to be an evangelist. That's not my gifting. Like when I try, people actually run from me and like, evangelism must be stupid. It's all about the word, or it's all about worship or whatever. Or, oh, I don't get to, I really wanted that job. I didn't get it. It's a dumb job anyway. Or, man, I really wanted to marry that person. They didn't want to marry me. They must be an awful person. Maybe they're a great person. They just didn't want to marry you. There's good things out there that don't have to be yours. You don't have to destroy it in your mind to come to terms with the fact it's not yours. Again, we keep our eye on our real goal. So if we keep our eyes on the real goal, we won't be scared when the method that we thought was a solution gets attacked. Wow, this method isn't working out. That's fine. That's just a method. It's like, oh man, I'm called to missions. And then later on you find out, wait, maybe I'm not called to missions. And you can have that sense of loss. It's like, well, okay, but I still have a calling, so what's that, right? Things can adapt and morph over time. We don't have to have that sense of loss. King David is a great example. In 2 Samuel 15, 25, and 26, this is after Absalom started his rebellion. And David said to Zadok, so the priests, so David had to run away with his family and some of his soldiers and advisors and all them. And then the priests brought the Ark of the Covenant with them. And David said, no, send it back. So verse 25, Then the king said to Zadok, carry the ark of God back into the city. If I find favor in the eyes of the Lord, he will bring me back and show me both it and his dwelling place. But if he says thus, I have no delight in you, here I am. Let him do to me as seems good to him. So what David is saying is, my goal isn't to hang on to being king. My goal isn't to hang on to power. My goal is to be humble before God. He's the one who made me king. If it's time for me to stop being king, I'm okay with that because that was never my real goal. That was the method of me being humble. And if the method changes, I'm fine with that. And so he's saying, if God wants me to stop being king, I'm fine with that. If he wants me to stay king, then nothing can stop me from becoming king again. So I'm not worried one bit, right? So he didn't freak out because the method changed. So again, tunnel vision on the method will make problems even worse. A few other quick examples. If you say, my goal is to be healthy, and then you say, well, the method is to be healthy, you have to lose weight and work out. Okay, so I'm going to stop eating and start using steroids. Okay, you get tunnel vision on the method, and now what happens? Well, now I've never been less healthy, right? Where it's like, okay, the real goal got sidetracked by the method. Or another example, I want to provide for my family. Here's the method. Money helps provide. Okay, so I'm going to neglect my family to get money. Okay, now my family doesn't even know who I am, right? So again, these are easy examples, but we can get so caught up in how we're pursuing our goal, we forget the real goal. Another one, I want to get to know God more. So the method is I'll spend more time in prayer. And then what happens? It's like, God, please don't interrupt. I have an agenda. I'm praying for an hour and I have this checklist I have to get through. Please don't talk. I'm talking, right? And so you miss it. It's like, okay, relationship tanked because now I created this rule that I have to stick to. So again, if we forget our goal, we'll solve the wrong problem. We might even blame the goal. You might say, see, I never should have wanted to be healthy because now I have all these steroids in my system and I stopped eating. And wanting to be healthy is the problem. No, that wasn't the problem. I never should have wanted to provide for my family because now I'm so busy at work, I never see them. No, the goal wasn't the problem. It's the fixation on the method. We need to be like little children and keep asking why. This is my goal. Why? Well, because this is my goal. Why? Well, this is my goal. Well, why? Why do you want that? Why do you want that? Keep going as far as you can. Why do you want to be a pastor? Because God called me to. Why do you want to do what God called you to do? Because I love him. Why do you love him? Because he first loved me. He saved me. Why did he first love you and save you? Because I'm his child. I'm precious to him. Okay, that's the root. So even if you lose your church, I'm not doing this because I care about that so much. I'm doing this because God likes me, right? If you're pastoring and half your church leaves or somebody doesn't like you or someone says you're the worst pastor I've ever met, you're not saying, well, that wasn't my goal in the first place. That was the method. My real goal is God loves me and enjoys me, and I want to live life with him. And that caused a chain reaction that led to me becoming the pastor and preaching a terrible sermon by mistake, whatever. I'm not going to feel bad about that because I'm doing this because God likes me. So I don't care if you like me or not. So I think I'm going to stop here and pick up, again, this is a two-parter, so I'm going to pick up next hour right where we left off. So thank you all very much.